The sun had barely peeked over the jagged horizon when the small wooden cart rattled into the dusty town square of Dry Creek. The air was dry, carrying the faint scent of sagebrush and the lingering traces of last night's rain. In the back of the cart, Maria clutched her newborn son to her chest, her body weak and trembling. She had given life only minutes ago, and yet the cruel world seemed determined to snatch it away. The town was quiet, save for the occasional clatter of a horse's hoof and the low hum of morning activity. Maria's captor, a crooked-tied trader named Saloon, gave no quarter. "Step lively, girl," he barked. "The sooner this is done, the sooner I can be rid of you." Her heart raced, not just from exhaustion, but from terror. She had heard whispers of the markets in other towns. Women and children sold to strangers with nary a thought for their lives. And now, her fate hung by the cruelest thread imaginable, as Sloane called out to the small crowd gathering near the wooden platform. Maria's gaze swept over the faces of the townsfolk. Some averted their eyes. Some stared, curiosity mingled with discomfort. But then she saw him, a man riding slowly toward the square on a chestnut stallion. He was tall, with broad shoulders and eyes the color of storm clouds, sharp and assessing. His hat shaded his face, but there was a calm authority in his bearing, the sort that made even Sloane pause. "Who's buyin'?" Sloane's voice cut across the square like a whip. The man dismounted with practiced ease, boots crunching against the gravel. He tipped his hat, revealing a face that was weathered but kind, with a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I reckon I might be," he said, his voice low and steady. "Tell me, what's the story here?" Sloane scowled, sizing him up. "Fresh mother. Just gave birth. Strong little one too. Mine to sell." Maria's heart leaped. Something in the way he looked at her, calm, unhurried, not a trace of greed, made her feel, for the first time in hours, a flicker of hope. I don't need money," the man continued. "I need someone I can help. Someone who's been treated wrong by this world. Maybe a chance to start over." His eyes softened as they met Maria's. "Ma'am, I'm not here to take you from your child. I'm here to protect you both." Sloane laughed, harsh and sharp. "You think you can buy her for kindness? That's not how it works." The stranger dropped a small leather pouch onto the platform. Coins spilled out with a satisfying clink. "This'll do," he said. "And anything else needed for the boy?" The crowd murmured. Some shook their heads. Others whispered prayers. Sloane's expression hardened, but he knew a challenge when he saw one. With a grunt, he waved the man away and gestured toward Maria. "Fine, she's yours, but don't expect her to thank you." The man stepped closer, keeping his tone gentle. "I don't expect thanks. I just want to make sure you and your boy live properly, safely." He extended a gloved hand. Maria hesitated, then placed her small one into his. In that moment, she felt something she hadn't felt in weeks or maybe her entire life, the stirrings of trust. He guided her from the platform, his presence solid and reassuring. As they walked toward the stables, she noticed the way the townsfolk parted, giving space to the two who seemed bound together by something neither of them fully understood yet, a promise of protection, a whisper of hope. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows behind them. The dusty square, once a place of fear and despair, seemed to shift under the weight of possibility. For the first time since her child had cried his first breath into the world, Maria dared to believe that life could still be kind, that the horizon held something better. The man, his name, she would soon learn, was Luke. Led them to his ranch just outside town, where the wind swept over rolling fields and the distant mountains framed the sky. "You're safe now," he said simply, and Maria clutched her son closer, tears stinging her eyes. For the first time, she allowed herself to hope. The first days at Luke's ranch were quiet, almost unnervingly so for Maria. The house itself sat atop a gentle rise, its weathered wood catching the morning sun, the wide porch a perfect vantage over rolling fields and distant mountains. It smelled of cedar, fresh hay, and the faint tang of horses, a scent that was at once strange and oddly comforting to her. Luke led her inside, helping her settle into a small guest room that overlooked the pasture. He had already prepared a crib for the baby, a sturdy little thing carved from oak, and a basket of clean linens. Maria ran her fingers over the smooth wood, her mind still foggy from the past few days, from the terror she had endured. But even here, she could feel the weight of care and thoughtfulness in every detail. "I don't need a thank you," Luke said, his voice echoing softly in the sunlit room. "You and the boy need a place to heal. That's enough." Maria looked at him, a mix of gratitude and wariness in her eyes. I've never known anyone like you," she whispered. "I don't know how to." Her voice trailed off, the words too heavy to finish. Luke nodded, understanding. You'll get used to the rhythm here. Life's steady on a ranch, even when the world outside ain't. The days slipped into a quiet routine. Maria tended to the baby while Luke went about his work mending fences, checking on the livestock, riding out to distant pastures. Each evening, he would return, tired but steadfast, and Maria found herself drawn to the simple steadiness of his presence. He never asked questions about her past, never pushed for stories she wasn't ready to tell. He simply offered the rhythm of safety and a space to breathe. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, Luke appeared on the porch with 2 mugs of steaming coffee. He handed one to Maria, and they sat in companionable silence, the baby sleeping soundly in his crib nearby. "You ever ride?" Luke asked, nodding toward the stables. Maria shook her head. "I've only ever seen horses from a distance. I don't know anything about riding." He smiled, a slow, easy grin. "That's about to change. Horses have a way of teaching you patience and courage." The next morning, he led her to a gentle mare named Daisy. At first, Maria trembled, uncertain of her footing, and fearful of the animal's size, but Luke's calm guidance, his steady hand on hers, reassured her. By the end of the ride across the rolling hills, her laughter rang freely in the open air, carried by the wind. It was a sound she hadn't known she could make, carefree, light, and full of life. As weeks turned into months, Maria began to feel a sense of belonging she had never known. She learned to tend the small garden Luke had cultivated, to mend the fences alongside him, and to care for the animals that roamed the ranch. Each task brought a quiet satisfaction, a sense of purpose beyond mere survival, and slowly, she began to notice Luke in ways that went beyond gratitude. The way he would glance at her over a fence, the way his eyes softened when he spoke to her, the subtle brush of his hand when handing her a tool, almost accidental gestures that set her heart alight. One evening, as they worked together in the barn, Maria found herself laughing at a story Luke told of a runaway calf. He laughed too, a deep rolling sound that seemed to shake the very rafters of the barn. In that moment, the world outside their little ranch seemed to vanish, leaving only the 2 of them and the soft glow of lantern light. "Luke," Maria began, but she stopped, unsure of what words could convey what she felt. He looked at her, reading her hesitation, and said softly, "Don't worry about putting it into words. I understand, Maria, I feel it too." For the first time in her life, Maria allowed herself to hope not just for safety, but for love, the kind of love that was patient, strong, and unwavering, the kind that could mend wounds not just of the body, but of the soul. That night, as she watched her sleeping son and felt Luke's presence nearby, Maria realized something she hadn't dared to believe before. Life could be good, life could be gentle, and maybe, just maybe, she could find happiness again, in a place that felt like home. The winds of the west blew softly over the ranch that night, carrying with them the promise of new beginnings, and the faint, thrilling stir of a love that had only just begun to grow. Life on the ranch had settled into a rhythm, the kind that made the heart feel steady and the mind feel calm. Maria had grown stronger, her laughter ringing through the fields like a bell in the morning. Luke's presence was constant, a quiet anchor in her world. Their bond, once tentative and cautious, was deepening with each passing day. Yet, even on the most peaceful ranches, the past has a way of catching up, especially in the wild, unforgiving expanse of the West. It was a late afternoon when a rider appeared on the ridge, the sun glinting off his spurs. At first, Maria thought it was a traveler seeking shelter or trade, but the man's eyes, hard, calculating, and unmistakably familiar, made her blood run cold. Sloan. He dismounted with a swagger that betrayed his confidence, his gaze immediately locking onto Maria and the baby in her arms. Well, he drawled, his voice like gravel on metal. "Seems you've got yourself a fancy new life." Maria's fingers tightened around the baby's blanket. "What do you want, Sloan?" Her voice trembled but carried a steel edge. Luke stepped forward, tall and imposing, his hand resting near the holster at his hip. "You're a long way from town, Sloan. Whatever you're here for, I suggest you turn around and ride back." Sloan smirked, unfazed. "Oh, I'm not here to argue, Cowboy. I just want what's mine. You see, that girl and that boy belong to me, and I'm here to claim them." Maria felt a surge of panic. She had hoped the past would stay buried, that the freedom Luke had given her was safe and untouchable. But Sloane's presence shattered that fragile illusion. She looked to Luke, her eyes wide, silently begging him to protect what mattered most. Luke's jaw tightened. "Not a chance. You don't get to touch them. She's under my protection now, and you'll leave before I make you regret staying." His voice was calm but carried the weight of threat, one that made even the hardened trader pause. Sloan laughed. A harsh, bitter sound. Protection. You think a man and a handful of cattle can keep me away? I've done worse than ride into a ranch. Don't think for a second you can stop me. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Maria's mind raced, her instincts screaming at her to flee, to hide, to do anything to keep her child safe. But Luke's steady presence reminded her she wasn't alone. He moved closer, his eyes never leaving Sloane's. You're wrong, Sloane. You've underestimated what I'll do to keep them safe. Sloane's smirk faltered, just slightly. There was a moment of silence, the kind that stretches unbearably in the desert heat. Then, with a final glare, he spat into the dirt. This ain't over, he warned, mounting his horse. I'll be back. And next time, you won't be so lucky. And just like that, he rode off, leaving a cloud of dust and unease in his wake. Maria sank to her knees, holding her son close, the fear she had felt for so long rising up again. Luke knelt beside her, wrapping a protective arm around her shoulders. You're safe for now, he said, his voice low and comforting. I promise you, I'll do everything in my power to make sure no one takes him from you. For the first time since the sale in the town square, Maria allowed herself to cry. Tears of fear, relief, and gratitude mingled as she leaned against Luke's broad chest. His hand rested over hers on the baby, steady and reassuring. A silent vow that no harm would come to them. As night fell over the ranch, the stars sparkling like scattered diamonds over the endless prairie, Maria understood something important. Life in the West was unpredictable, filled with dangers lurking just beyond the horizon. But with Luke by her side, she could face whatever came their way. Together, they were stronger than the shadows of the past. And in that quiet, starlit moment, Maria felt a new kind of courage blossoming inside her, a courage born, not just from survival, but from love, from hope, from the certainty that she and her son had finally found a man willing to stand between them and the world's cruelty. Tomorrow, they would face new challenges, but tonight, they were together, and that was enough. The next morning, the ranch was alive with the sounds of work, the lowing of cattle, the creak of wagon wheels, and the rhythmic pounding of hooves on dusty trails. Maria moved among the chores with a quiet determination, her hands no longer trembling as they tended the garden or fed the animals. Yet, despite the outward calm, a shadow lingered over the ranch. Sloane's threat. Luke had fortified the homestead as best he could. Fences were repaired, gates reinforced, and the barn doors secured with heavy locks. He rode out to check the perimeter, his keen eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of trouble. Maria watched him leave, her heart thudding with a mixture of admiration and fear. The West was beautiful and harsh all at once, and Luke's presence made it bearable. As the sun climbed high, Maria and the baby moved to the porch, where the wind carried the scent of sagebrush and wildflowers. You think he'll really come back? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Luke's eyes softened as he turned toward her. Sloane's a desperate man. He'll try, sure, but he doesn't know what he's up against. He knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I'm not just protecting him. I'm protecting you too. Maria's chest tightened at his words. She had never felt so seen, so safe, yet so vulnerable. In the wilderness of the West, where law and order were often as unpredictable as the weather, Luke had become her anchor. Days turned into weeks, and the ranch thrived. Maria grew stronger and more confident with each passing day, her bond with Luke deepening in ways words could hardly capture. They worked side by side, mending fences, gathering firewood, and tending the animals. Each shared task, each quiet moment, wove a tapestry of trust and affection. One afternoon, while riding along the ridge, Luke spoke in that low, steady voice she had come to rely on. You know, Maria, life on the prairie isn't easy, but it's honest, it gives you what you put into it. Maria nodded, feeling the truth of his words. I never thought I'd find a place like this, or someone like you. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, the wind seemed to hold its breath. Luke's hand brushed hers as they guided their horses along the trail. The gesture was small, but it carried a weight neither of them could ignore. I reckon I'm lucky too, he said softly. But the West was rarely quiet for long. One evening, as the sky blazed with the colors of sunset, a distant shout broke the calm. Maria's heart leaped. Luke's eyes narrowed, and he gripped the reins tightly. Stay here, he commanded. Riding out toward the sound, he returned minutes later with a grim expression. A herd of cattle had broken through the northern fence, driven by a storm or a careless hand. Some were injured, others panicked, and if they wandered too far, they could be lost or worse, stolen. Without hesitation, Maria moved to help, her fear tempered by determination. She worked alongside Luke, guiding the cattle back, calming them with soft words and steady hands. In those hours, under the fading light, something remarkable happened. The barriers between them fell away completely. Luke caught her hand as they corralled the last of the herd. "You're stronger than you realize," he said, his voice low, almost reverent. "You've got the heart of the West in you." Maria felt warmth flood her chest, a mixture of pride and a deep, aching affection. "I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted, though she knew it was only partly true. She had discovered a strength she never knew she possessed, and Luke had been there to guide it, to nurture it, to stand beside her. That night, as they sat on the porch with the baby sleeping peacefully inside, the stars stretched endlessly above them. The ranch had faced its first trial, and they had survived together, and in that shared triumph, a bond stronger than any fence or fortification took root. The West was wild and unpredictable, but for the first time, Maria understood something she had never believed possible. Love could thrive even in the harshest of landscapes. With Luke by her side, she could face anything: the storms, the dangers, and even the ghosts of her past. And as the prairie wind whispered through the tall grasses, carrying the scent of freedom and promise, Maria allowed herself to imagine a future she had once thought impossible, a life full of hope, resilience, and the quiet, enduring power of love. The West has a way of reminding you that peace is always fragile. Maria had come to love the rhythms of the ranch, the scent of morning dew on the fields, the soft lowing of cattle, and Luke's steady presence beside her. But that fragile calm was about to shatter. It began with a messenger, a rider who arrived just as the sun was climbing over the horizon, kicking up dust behind his horse. He rode up the long drive to the ranch and dismounted hastily, his face pale under the wide brim of his hat. "Luke," he called, urgency in his voice. "There's trouble at Dry Creek. Sloan's back, and he's gathered men. He's coming for what he thinks is his." Luke's jaw tightened. He exchanged a look with Maria, who felt a chill run down her spine despite the morning warmth. The fear of the past surged through her like a wave, threatening to pull her under. But this time, she wasn't helpless, and Luke wouldn't let her be. "They won't take him," Luke said, his voice low and controlled, though Maria could see the tension in his eyes. "Not while I'm here." She reached for his hand, her fingers finding his in a grip that spoke of trust and shared resolve. "Then we face them together," she said, her voice firmer than she expected. The next hours were a whirlwind of preparation. Luke rallied the ranch hands, barricading gates and securing the animals. Maria, though inexperienced in combat or strategy, found herself taking charge in ways that surprised even her. She organized the children and animals to safer corners of the property, reinforced doors, and kept a watchful eye on the horizon. By the time the first signs of Sloan's posse appeared, a cloud of dust rising in the distance, the ranch was ready. Luke and his men took positions along the fences, rifles slung, eyes sharp. Maria stayed behind the porch, clutching the baby and scanning the horizon with a mixture of fear and determination. The attackers arrived under the blazing sun, shouting and spurring their horses forward. But Luke and his men met them head-on, firing warning shots and driving the trespassers back. Sloan himself was at the front, a cruel smirk etched across his face, as if he relished the challenge. Maria's heart pounded, yet she refused to show fear. She could hear the sharp crack of rifles, the snort of horses, and Luke's steady commands cutting through the chaos. And through it all, she realized something profound. The ranch, the land, and Luke himself were worth fighting for, worth every ounce of courage she could summon. When Sloan made a daring push toward the house, Luke rode out to intercept him. The two men clashed with a force born of desperation and anger. Luke's determination to protect his family against Sloan's obsession with possession. Maria watched from the porch, her hands tightening around the baby as she whispered silent prayers. The struggle was intense but brief. Luke's resolve, skill, and deep knowledge of the land gave him the advantage. Sloan was finally driven back, retreating with a furious shout, leaving his men scattered and defeated. By the time the dust settled, the ranch stood intact, and the threat had been repelled at least for now. Luke returned to Maria, sweat and dust on his face, but a victorious gleam in his eyes. He took her hands in his, brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "We did it," he said simply. "We're safe, for now." Maria leaned into him, her heart full of gratitude and something deeper. Something that had been growing steadily since that first day he had saved her from the market. "I never doubted you," she said softly, though the truth was that she had doubted herself at times. But in this moment, with the danger behind them and the baby sleeping safely inside, She felt invincible. Luke smiled, pressing his forehead to hers. "You've been braver than anyone I've ever known," he whispered, "and you've made this ranch and my life better just by being in it." For the first time, Maria allowed herself to embrace the depth of what she felt, not just gratitude, not just admiration, but love. A love forged in trials, in danger, and in the quiet moments of shared life on the frontier. The West was still wild and unpredictable, and dangers could return at any moment, but Maria knew that, together with Luke, she could face whatever came. And in the vast, endless horizon of the prairie, she allowed herself to dream not just of safety, but of a life filled with love, family, and hope. As night fell, the ranch settled under the stars, the wind whispering through the grasses like a lullaby. For the first time in a long time, Maria felt not just relief, but a profound sense of belonging. And with Luke by her side, she knew they could weather any storm the West might send their way. The ranch lay quiet under a pale dawn, the first light glinting off the morning dew on the tall grasses. After Sloane's retreat, life returned to its steady rhythm, though the tension of the past weeks lingered like a faint shadow. Maria had grown stronger, more confident, yet beneath it all, she carried the quiet thrill of survival and the deep, unspoken feelings she had for Luke. It was early morning when Luke appeared at the porch, a rough wool blanket draped over his shoulders, his boots dusted from a long ride. Maria looked up from the baby, who gurgled softly in her arms, and her heart skipped a beat. There was a softness in Luke's eyes today, a warmth that made the prairie air itself seem brighter. "Morning," he said, his voice low and steady. He rested a hand lightly on her shoulder, a touch that sent a shiver down her spine. "You look like you could use a break." Maria smiled, a small, shy curl of lips. I was just watching him," she said, glancing down at the baby. "It's hard to believe he's mine, after everything." Luke's gaze softened. He knelt beside her, careful not to disturb the baby, and brushed a stray lock of hair from her face. "Everything that's happened, every hardship, you've been incredible. You've faced it all and come out stronger. You deserve peace and happiness." Maria's heart ached at his words. For the first time, she allowed herself to acknowledge the truth she had been holding back. "Luke, I don't just feel safe with you anymore. I think I'm falling for you." The confession hung in the air, delicate and fragile, yet somehow undeniable. Luke's expression softened, and a slow smile curved his lips. He leaned closer, his hand gently cupping her cheek. "Maria, I've been falling for you from the moment you stepped onto this ranch. From the moment I saw you with him." He nodded toward the baby, still dozing peacefully. "You and him, you're my life now." The world seemed to shrink to the space between them, the sound of the prairie fading into a quiet hush. Luke lowered his forehead to hers, their breaths mingling in the cool morning air. The vulnerability, the trust, and the raw emotion in that moment were more powerful than any words they could speak. Then, as if the prairie itself approved, Luke's lips met hers in a tender, lingering kiss, one that spoke of devotion, protection, and a love that had grown through hardship and hope alike. Maria melted into his arms, the weight of her past finally lifting as she embraced a future she had never dared to imagine. After a long moment, they pulled back, foreheads still touching, and Maria laughed softly, a sound of pure relief and joy. "I never thought I'd feel this safe, this happy." "You deserve it," Luke said simply. "Every day, for the rest of your life." The morning passed in a peaceful rhythm, the kind only the prairie could offer. Luke and Maria walked together along the fence line, the baby nestled in her arms, talking quietly, their hands brushing, their hearts in perfect sync. Each shared glance, each small touch, was a promise not just of love, but of partnership, trust, and the quiet courage that came from facing the wild world together. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the distant hills and painted the sky with streaks of gold and crimson, they sat on the porch, the baby asleep inside. Luke draped an arm around Maria, pulling her close, and she rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I never thought I'd have a life like this," Maria whispered, "but now, I can't imagine ever leaving it." Luke kissed the top of her head, the warmth of his lips lingering. "You won't ever have to," he murmured. "This is your home, our home, and as long as I'm here, nothing will ever take it from you." Under the vast, starlit sky, with the wind whispering through the prairie grasses, Maria felt a deep abiding peace. The past, the fear, the pain, the uncertainty was still a part of her, but it no longer defined her. She had love, she had family, she had a life carved from hope and courage, and she had Luke. For the first time in her life, Maria believed fully in the power of a second chance. And as she held Luke close, she allowed herself to dream of a future filled not just with survival, but with joy, laughter, and the unshakable bond of love forged on the wide, wild plains of the West. The prairie night embraced them, a blanket of stars above, and in the heart of that untamed land, Maria knew she had finally found her place. The sun rose over the horizon in a blaze of gold and amber, spilling light across the wide, open plains. The ranch was alive with motion, once more cattle grazing peacefully, horses flicking their tails, and the baby cooing softly in Maria's arms. For the first time since she had been sold, Maria felt the kind of calm that comes from knowing you truly belong somewhere. Luke had been up before dawn, checking the fences and securing the barns. When he returned, his hat in hand and his boots coated with the morning dust, he found Maria waiting on the porch, the baby nestled against her chest. The sight of him brought a warm flush to her cheeks, a reminder of how far their lives had come. "Morning, beautiful," Luke said, his voice low and steady, carrying the warmth and certainty she had come to rely on. "Morning," Maria replied, smiling. The words felt simple but carried the weight of her new life, the life she had fought for, the life Luke had given her. Together, they stepped out into the sunlight, walking through the fields that stretched endlessly before them. The baby rested against Maria, his small hand clutching her fingers, as if already claiming the land as his own. Luke's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining, a silent promise of protection, love, and partnership. The past had been a dark, twisting path, filled with fear, danger, and uncertainty. Sloane's shadow had haunted them, and Maria had once believed that freedom was a fleeting dream. But the prairie had a way of teaching resilience, of shaping people into versions of themselves stronger than they ever imagined. And together, Luke and Maria had endured, building not just a ranch, but a home. Later in the morning, Luke and Maria worked side by side, mending fences and tending to the animals. Their hands brushed occasionally, each contact sending small sparks of warmth through them. The baby, curious and alert, watched from the blanket Maria had draped over the fence post, his tiny eyes wide and bright with wonder. "I never thought life could feel like this," Maria said softly, leaning against Luke as they rested for a moment. "I mean, safe, happy, and full of hope. I thought I'd only ever know fear." Luke turned his gaze toward her, his expression a mixture of tenderness and determination. "You deserved more than fear. You deserved a life worth living. And, I swear to you, I'll spend the rest of mine making sure you will hand him never know it again." He nodded toward the baby. "This little one, he's a reminder of the life we've built, and every day we'll protect it, together." As the afternoon sun climbed high, a sense of peace settled over the ranch. Birds sang in the trees, cattle grazed lazily, and the gentle wind carried the scent of wildflowers and fresh hay. Maria felt a profound gratitude for the simple, honest life they were forging, a life built from courage, love, and the determination to rise above the hardships of the past. That evening, the family sat together on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky with brilliant shades of orange and pink. Luke held Maria close, his arm draped protectively around her shoulders, while the baby slept peacefully between them. "You've given me more than a home," Maria whispered, resting her head against Luke's chest. "You've given me hope, love, a second chance." Luke kissed the top of her head, the gesture filled with the quiet strength of a man who had fought for everything he valued. "And you've given me something I never thought I'd have," he murmured. "A family. A reason to keep going, no matter what the West throws at us." The prairie night fell, stars glittering like scattered diamonds overhead. Maria looked out across the land, feeling a deep sense of belonging. The past, painful and cruel as it had been, was now a distant memory, softened by love and resilience. Here, in the vast, untamed beauty of the West, she had found her freedom, her family, and her heart's true home. Luke squeezed her hand, and she leaned into him, their hearts beating in quiet harmony. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, but for now, they simply savored the stillness, the warmth, and the love that had grown stronger than fear, cruelty, or loss. Under the endless prairie sky, Maria realized that she was no longer a woman running from the past. She was a mother, a partner, and a woman who had finally claimed her place in the world. With Luke by her side, and their child safe in their arms, she knew that their story was only just beginning. The West was wild and unpredictable, but it was theirs, and with love, courage, and unwavering determination, nothing could ever take it away.